Hi, Simon. Thank you very much. And thank you all of you, all of the participants, first for inviting us here and for letting us talk about this topic, which we think is quite interesting. Looking forward to the discussion. Okay, so just a minute before I start, a few words to present myself. I'm Federico Musciotto at FNA now since 6 years. And basically, I'm a lead data scientist, and my main contribution in the last years to FNA has been working on graph AI and models in general associated to fraud scoring and the fraud detection cycle, which is also one of the reasons why I'm here today to talk about what we do at FNA and try to understand and try to foster the discussion about how we can integrate and we can go on an integration journey with Moduloop 2.
I just wanted to say that the whole area of fraud detection, fraud management is obviously key to the Moduloop community and in particular to our adopters. And you had the presentation from Tazama earlier on, and Tazama are obviously a key partner in this, but they're not the only partner in this space. And another one that we've been talking to extensively over the last year or so is FNA. They offer a commercial product as opposed to the open source product that Tazama offers. And also, I know that Tazama and FNA talk to each other and collaborate in any case. So there's no issue with them both being present on this call, for example. But I want this session now to be not just a presentation from FNA. This isn't a sales process at all. This is all about how do we integrate FNA and Moduloop? And I'm very pleased that some of our engineers and developers are here on this call today, because I want to use this in a collaborative way to start this integration process and to essentially build the journey as Federico has put on his slide here. So this isn't just Federico presenting. This is, once Federico has done his intro, I want this to be a discussion on the best way to integrate. So back to you, Federico, and I'm sorry for that.
Yes, no, thank you very much, Paul, and absolutely, exactly a second everything you said, because I'm not here to sell anything, first of all, because I'm not a sales guy, so I don't know how to do it, but also because it's the point here is try to understand basically how we can proceed further. And also with respect to this, I'll try, not necessarily to keep it short as long. I'll just try to convey the message of what can be, what can be the step. So what we do and what can be the step towards the integration. But specifically in this, because this is a collaborative discussion, just feel free to jump in to raise questions at any time if you have, so that we don't necessarily need to have first the presentation and then the discussion. We can already start the discussion during the presentation and move forward. So feel just free to interrupt me at any time. Okay, so I thought while putting together this, these few slides, I thought it was interesting to show you a bit how we talk about FNA around and how we basically present the fraud detection and in general the fraud, what we call the National Fraud Portal around, again, not because the purpose is to sell this for you, but I think because this can also help in understanding specifically what FNA does in this space, and what are the similarities and the differences of that. For example, I will discuss briefly about what Fraud Portal is, and in our vision, Fraud Portal is this collection of tools, and we're gonna see which these tools are, that basically all together participated in some kind of form of a suite to basically the anti-fraud life cycle. So it's about detecting payment in pre-settlement versus mitigating the effects of frauds and so on. And why I'm saying this, because for example, here you can see a list of of people that we say are our offer is aimed to help. And I mean, here we say it also helps these entities, but what we mean here really is, I mean, that among these are our clients. So basically, National Fraud Portal also in different, I mean, the different experience and discussion that we're having around, it's not necessarily a tool with a fixed governance. There is some there are different levels of different organization governance that can be set up, but usually we rely on some kind of central institution, central coordinator that basically allow us the deployment of the fraud portal. So usually it's, I mean, it's central banks, but it's not necessarily only central banks, can be supported or even replaced by a consortium of banks. It can be, and usually, I mean, there are as participants, law enforcement agency, FMI, FIU, and so on and so forth. I know that already this could make some distance, not between Mojaloop, because I mean, in my understanding, and again, I mean, please correct me and jump in at any time if I say things that are not reflecting, I mean, your vision. In my understanding, Mojaloop is more of a grassroots tool that actually is stemming not from some central authority, but actually maybe from the lack of a central coordination in order to stem to bring financial inclusion and so to allow basically people to make payments. So of course there is this difference, and I think this difference can also be highlighted, for example, in makes also sense when we look at the full set of tools. But at the same time, I think that I mean there are junctures and there are overlaps in what we do, the way we design the scoring, for example, the fraud scoring and the fraud detection part, that actually play quite well with what Mojaloop is, even if I mean there's this superficial mismatch between the entity we design the fraud detection and fraud portal for and maybe what Mojaloop is today. So this is a quick overview, and we don't need to go into the details of the different things. Here, I mean, the point is that some of these, like case management and money trails, are about fraud mitigation, which means that fraud happen and are reported into the system through different ways. It can be self-report, it can be because it was detected, some payment was not blocked, but still was detected to be potentially fraudulent and stuff like that. And this is about, okay, fraud happens, and we need to recover the money. And I mean, this is usually, again, these two solutions are deployed across different agencies, from banks to financial to different kind of financial institutions, central banks, and so on, with this in mind. And similarly, some other of these tools actually require some kind of central hub or, you know, centralized platform, no matter precisely how the players or which players are involved to work. But this is not necessarily the case for the fraud scoring, or at least we will see this a bit more in detail. The fraud scoring, which I think is what we can focus here on to bring forward the discussion, just requires that there is some kind of I mean, centralized, let's call it, payment system or processor of payments that basically contains in a standardized way the just aggregate and store and process in a standard way payments, which I think is exactly the role that can be played by Mojaloop in the integration. And this is just another slide to push a bit this message about, you know, you have these different entities that basically contributed to the consolidation of this centralized hub of data that then is used for different objectives, which again is fraud mitigation, can be different things, but it's also fraud detection in pre-settlement. And again, here, even forgetting about the specific class of these actors that are around the centralized data, we can focus on the fact that there is a centralized payment data, and this already enables some action in the with respect to anti-fraud capabilities. And going now a bit more into the details of what basically we talk about when we refer to fraud scoring. So basically, I mean, fraud scoring, it's again real-time decision system to detect anomalous transaction and mule accounts based on GraphAI. I will just briefly, there's a slide on GraphAI. Again, I mean, this is not so important here, but it's just to give you a bit of a flavor of what exactly we're doing, because our point is that we work on centralized data, and I think here there's, for example, an overlap between what we do with central banks and so on, and what we find in your use case. That, of course, centralized data, which means basically bird eye view, holistic view on the network of payments in a given region, a given area. On one side, it's very powerful, and we use it, for example, all this stress that we put on GraphAI is specifically because we really try to get the max out of the fact that we can see payments as a network, and we can enrich basically the information on payments, on accounts involved, and so on, looking at the neighborhood of these payments and accounts in the network itself. So it's about basically using the information carried by the network of payments to extract as much as we can and improve the prediction. But on the other side, of course, the fact that we are talking about centralized data means that the extension, the type of fields that are available to us is quite limited, because, of course, we have information about, we will see this better, the information that define a payment in terms of who is paying, who is receiving, how much, and so on, but we don't have much more in most cases. So, I mean, we cannot use any PII, we cannot use any KYC type data and so on, because again, that is much more complicated to ask on a network holistic, in a network holistic system. So basically, the fraud, going back to the slide, fraud detection is about scoring in pre-settlement. Here we are talking about how this interacts with banks, because it's also one of the selling points, the fact that this can be added to what banks already do in terms to enhance their fraud detection. But actually, this is it's not necessarily the case. This can, our scores can be used as standalone source to for risk scoring, for fraud detection, for quantifying fraud risk. So I mean, it's we can also, and this maybe there will be a couple of slides on how we actually envision our flow, and when we talk about banks, who can play the role of banks instead. I mean, not necessarily they have to be banks. And on the right, there are just a bit of requirements, at least specs of how we do things in terms of what is the more or less the TPS that we've been tested, the number of transactions per day. Of course, I mean, and I think, yeah, I don't need to teach you anything, but probably it's the other way around. We know very well that TPS is not constant during the day. So, I mean, of course, we need to take into account to accommodate the fact that there are high traffic periods during the day. And that is, I mean, it's something that we're aware and we incorporate in the way we, we build our system. And all of this is to enable some basically fast, low latency scoring that, I mean, okay, without focusing too much on the specific threshold, but it's compatible with a real-time payment settlement operation. Then, okay, here it's a bit more about, so what this is complement to what I was saying before, in the fact that, again, since we are talking about centralized payment data, we are used to the fact that we cannot expect to have who knows how many additional fields. So basically, we basically train our model to work on the least minimum number of field possible that still allow us to consider a payment, and also that still allow us to build a network around each payment, so that if you just put all these payments together with all these fields, you basically generate a network that then it's this very powerful object to enrich your fraud detection capability. So again, here we are talking about sender, recipient, timestamp, value, and some kind of identification of the transaction that is also not so necessarily needed. It's more like a way to avoid ambiguities between different payments, between same sender and receiver, and so on and so forth. And again, here we are talking about account number and the financial institution when we talk about the identifier of sender and the identifier of recipient. But I think we already have some previous conversation with Mojaloop, in which of course we highlighted that the way things work for you are quite different. We are not, we cannot talk about account number and financial institution, but basically payee, sender and recipient, payee and consignee and payer are actually characterized by phone number or different kind of hashes and tags that it's something, for example, that it's worth to expand. I think I already envisioned this, and in the last slide I put together a couple of things that it's worth to discuss. And I think this is one of those, because on one side, we don't necessarily need to disambiguate the account to the identity of the person behind it, because, for example, it's not something that we do in our system, specifically because ID, so the personal identification of individuals, is not something that is necessarily easy to get together with the payments. We are operating at the level of account numbers, which is, of course, you open you open an account in a bank, and that's what we use. So we don't need necessarily this identification of individuals, but at the same time, I realized that if the identifier in your system is just the number, this can be trickier than the phone number, for example. This can be trickier because basically this would allow, I don't know, if a mule just want to really hide his fingerprint behind his activity in a way that cannot be recognized, maybe just need to have a large number of phone numbers that, it's much easier to get than a large number of account numbers in a bank. So this is something that probably we can discuss a bit around where you stand at the moment and where to go, basically. Then sorry, maybe this is sorry, I don't know, sometimes Zoom is a bit disappointing. Maybe this was covering a bit the text. I hope now you can see everything. And okay, and then the other fields I think are quite self-explanatory. We don't need to talk too much around that. And basically, okay, here we go again. I think I'll move this here. And finally, we also have basically, not finally, but as a next step, again, I don't want to bother you too much. This is not about, it's not a data science call. It's not about, our methods. We can have a deep dive session anytime if you want, but it's not, this is the point. This is just a bit to show you this idea that looking at the network, basically, you can just enrich more the information around your account. So the basic idea that we use is that if we look at any of these accounts, we can, of course, engineer features based on his past activity that we do exactly using the data that I showed you. So we can do things like, okay, how much he was sending to how many different accounts, how much he was receiving, what was the velocity of his funds, the net balance, regular net balance, the net balance at regular intervals and stuff like that. But we saw that it's so much, we significantly improves on the prediction power of all of this if we complement this with some view of what's going on in the network around this account, which sometimes it really just bogs down to extract the same kind of features for all the neighbor all the account in the neighborhood, and just to some extent, incorporate this information, this additional view, these additional features about what's going on around him into the basically features that are used for the training and the prediction. So basically, this is more or less the concept. If you're interested, we can talk more, but I don't think it's the main focus for today. And going a bit more into then, okay, what do we mean specifically? So how do we envision this work, and what so what would be required, for example, from Mojaloop to interact with us, and for us to work with Mojaloop. This is as we usually show this to traditional payment system, central banks, and so on, so for consortium of banks and so on. And we can twist a bit around this because we can just adapt it to specifically who is going to play which role. But what is going on here in this diagram? Basically, starting from the beginning, so this node on the left here, that is where everything starts, because he receives the first step starts from here, is basically a bank that receives some payment instruction, which is just a client that want to pay, and just some client of the bank that want to pay someone else, and just submits this instruction to the bank. Basically, what the bank does in this can do in the National Fraud Portal is submit this information to the fraud portal. Here, here we're calling it fraud portal. Again, this is basically us. This is FNA. Sorry, this thing on Zoom keeps popping up. Maybe I can. Okay. Sorry for this. So the financial institution receives the instruction, is submitted to us basically, and this is we can see a bit better Barebone in the next slide. It just we can say this is just a post request, basically just asking us, okay, I have this data, should I do this payment or not? To which we respond. Basically, we give back a score, and that is a score. We can also give features, which are the features that we use for the that I showed you before, for basically in the model, both the behavioral feature and the graph features, so all the information that we are able to extract around the accounts that are involved in that payment, and we extract again this information from the full graph of payments. And basically then the banks take some decision. So what should I do with this risk score that I was receiving? And here we are not necessarily forcing any decision. Our role is just to give the payment, give the score, so give the score, and then let the bank decide what to do with that payment. And this is, I think, it's another point for us to discuss. So exactly what we should, given that here not necessarily we wouldn't have a bank, but maybe we have some node run by Mojaloop itself, or we can discuss this a bit more in detail. Given that here we don't have a bank, it would be useful for us to understand exactly what is most useful for us to give back, if it's a score from 0 to 1, if it's a binary threshold 0 or 1, so we advise or not advise to set this payment, if it's the full features, and then there's some additional engine run by, we discuss who that takes decision. This is all open points that we can tackle. But okay, again, in this flow, the bank has its own logic to decide what to do. It takes its own decision, and let's say that it's a yes. It says, okay, let's do this payment. It submit the payments to the payment switch, the payment operator, payment system, whatever is lying here. And why there is this additional connection between the payment switch and the fraud portal? Because basically, since the payment switch is the best holder of the data, the historic sequence of payment that has been settled, we usually envision it's not the only way possible. We can also take this data directly from the bank, but we usually propose this because it's more comfortable also for us. We envision that the payment switch upload the sequence of previous payment into the system, because again, these previous payments are these settled payments settled in the past, are used then by the fraud portal to by our system to calculate the features that are needed to score the new payments. That's more or less how it works. And
would this
yes.
be a good moment to butt in? I just wanted to point out we've only got about 20 minutes left, and do you think you will have time to move on to the integration task?
Okay, yeah. Yes, sure. So, I mean, very quickly, this is just the bare bone version of what I said before, in the sense that without looking at the specific actor, we need to have basically an upload. The way the system works, it just there's an asynchronous process that is uploading previously settled payments that is used by us to calculate the features, and then this happens independently, and then we have this back and forth of whoever needs to score the payments that submits the payload to be scored, and we give back a score and if needed features, score in different forms and so on. And basically going to the core of the thing, I mean, these are my personal view. I mean, the points that in my personal view can be useful to discuss today. So basically, the first one is, as we say, we usually talk, we usually work with central model of centralized government that involves certain kind of actors. We understand here the situation is different, but still in this process, we learn to be quite flexible with governance, with how things are structured and so on. So we can just discuss, for example, related to my previous slides, who will cover the different role and how, and if that is possible, so that then we can just design an infrastructure and a pipeline that accommodate that and just gives to us the input that we need and give back the output that we decide to. Something that I didn't cover too much in the point, but it's quite an important process here also to discuss in the way to have things that work together. Usually the advantage of talking to some centralized institution is that, not always, but sometimes someone has the power to basically put together a process to collect labels, which are quite important. By labels, I mean fraud reports, whatever happened in the past that was labeled as a malicious activity that we want to detect, basically, because our models are supervised models, it's machine learning, of course. And so we need to have some labels to basically, we can discuss also how to put in place system to collect these labels. And again, we are quite flexible with respect to this, but the goal is to have some labels put together so that we can train our basically model. This a bit related to the next step, a bit related to the governance issue. What is the desired outcome of the fraud detection? Is a score, is the features and so on, and who takes action, who we envision we should decide who is going to take action and how, basically, what is this action that is taken based on the score. And the last point, which is, again, since in my understanding, there's a bit this open issue that in Mojo Loop, the account identifiers are a bit weaker than, than in traditional banking with account numbers and so on. We can discuss around the idea, maybe we need to put in place some resolution for accounts. So basically trying to understand when two accounts are the same, when two phone numbers are acting for the same individual, the same account, or let's say the same set of funds, and so on and so forth. And this is my last slide. I hope that this was anyhow helpful or insightful, and I'm here and looking forward to the discussion. If you have, of course, any question, any comment, any suggestion how to go forward from this.
Sure. Thank you so much, Federico. James, your hand's up.
Yeah, I was going to ask from a technical perspective, do you have any documentation or guides on how we would physically flow real-time transfer data from say the Mojolic platform into your platform?
So basically, by real time, you need you mean the score? Of course, we can provide you any documentation that we have around this. Just to clarify, here we have two. There are these two communication. There is the scoring, and this is. We have just a post API, but we can post request, but we can also discuss what's the payload required and so on. On the upload, this is about as I was saying, the upload of past payment data, and also here we can discuss the specific format, both in terms of schema. So what should be in this data for us to have a minimum model and to operate with the minimum requirements, but also data format in terms, what do we need? We need a collection of JSON. I mean, we are quite flexible because again, you need to be flexible when we work with different institutions across different jurisdictions. So, I mean, it can be not really anything, but it can be a series of options from Parquet file to CSV to JSON and so on. And yes, we can submit any,
Okay, so it's it looks like a kind of JSON over HTTP REST-ish API, right? So would we have to make one API call per transaction? Or do you have like a stream interface? We use Apache Kafka as our streaming platform internally.
I think we discussed so far the idea of Kafka streams. We have implemented for a different application, which is not associated with frauds. With frauds, usually our client asks us some kind of batch update, so we work with this upload of some files. But I mean, I think I'm not an engineer, but I think we can. Since we have this working for in similar use cases, at least when we talk about uploading of a stream of payments, I think we can have it set also in terms of Apache Kafka or similar streams.
Okay, so if we wanted to say before we allow a transfer to pass through our platform, we would make an API call to your platform. You would append a score to that and return it to us, and then we would make a decision based on that score?
Yes, that's how we usually make. So the point is that we have as a separate process from this upload. We have just this score. Let's call it. We call it score endpoint, in which you just submit the payload, the information around the payment that has to be submitted. We score it back, and then you take the decision. But we can also, again, here we can be flexible in terms of we can already take the decision in the sense that if you calibrate us in terms of which kind of precision you expect, which level of recall you expect from the decisions, so false positives, false negatives. We're talking about the confusion matrix.
Yeah, for sure. I understand that. So, okay, so less than 10 milliseconds is your kind of SLA that you're offering for that real-time scoring, right? So it's a synchronous API, I'm guessing, by the looks of this. So we do like an HTTP post, and the HTTP response directly to that request would contain the score, right?
Exactly. And that's also why we have this split into two, because of course the upload and feature engineering and feature calculation cannot be fast. Cannot be that fast.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah. Perfect. Okay, so there's two steps. One is to configure and train the platform so it can spot and intercept the type of fraud that we're interested in based on our parameters and our tolerance levels for false positives, etc. And then there's a simple API integration, right? Okay, I follow.
Yes, exactly. And yes.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, James. Yes, Michael Richards, go ahead.
Thanks very much. Federico, I think my problem is that the Mojaloop system, the switch that is, really doesn't have any way of converting identifiers to accounts or account holders. And the problem is worse, I think, than the problem where you have some entity who has 2 or 3 phone numbers. For instance, they've opened a number of accounts. It's also that if, for instance, a payment was made to an account using a phone number as an identifier, and then a subsequent payment was made to the same account using a national ID as an identifier, there would be nothing in the Mojaloop switch which would enable you to infer from that those two payments were going to the same account. That's knowledge which in our world the account holding institution has. It knows how to translate between identifiers and accounts, and indeed hopefully between accounts and entities. But the switch doesn't have any of that knowledge.
Okay, yes, I think we already have this discussion. Indeed, I mean, last time we were also mentioning the idea, is this on your roadmap to introduce some kind of identifier for this or not?
Not.
Okay. Then, I mean,
sorry, not because we don't want to know.
Okay, which I think is I mean, it's a fair point. Then, I mean, of course, here this is as I was also saying, it's a bit of an open point because, of course, this I mean, it's hard. So this, let's say, it's unprecedented for us. Let's put it like this. That usually we work, as I said, with that different data from different sources than this. But what I mean, I can tell is that I think it's still worth to approach this as a, and yeah, it's more familiar to my realm, as a data science project, in the sense that if we're able to have some labels on this data and some payment data and the data exactly as it is and as it's planned to stay, then we can try to understand, because I can see different things here. We can see how first try to understand how much the network deteriorates, basically based on the fact that people maybe are constantly using different things and so on. Because also, if this is more associated with mulling behavior, then I mean, it's already carrying some signal that you can maybe use. The fact that usually there are these new identifiers that are not carrying much past data, past activity, and so on. Or we can also think, okay, then maybe let's do something in terms in this, you know, when you upload the past data on top of calculating the features, we also do some kind of processing that has the aim to try to infer, you know, accounts that are similar, again, different identifiers that might be associated to the same accounts using some kind of, again, account disambiguation logic and so on. So, I mean, my point is that I don't necessarily have an answer what is going to work and if any of this is going to work at all. But, I mean, I think the only way of knowing that is trying. So, I mean, if we have some data with the labels and so on, we can play with that and see how we fall in terms of performance of our model and how we can improve over that.
I suppose the point that that I would want to make is that this is information which the account holding institution does have. So obviously, when an account holding institution receives a payment, it must have some way of converting the identifier associated with that payment to an account number, and therefore some way of converting that account number to the entity that controls it. My point is that that's information that in our world belongs specifically to the account holding institution and not to us.
Yes, and but, I mean, this I understand, and indeed, all my answer was in the direction of assuming that we won't have that information, and so we need to do what we can without it. But I mean, of course, and here it's more for you to guide my idea if it's doable or not. Then would it be possible to have maybe the original institution being involved in this process in terms of, for example, the score arrives directly to them, and maybe the payload of the payment is not submitted by you, but it's submitted by them, carrying this information, and we do something around it, for example. I mean, I envision, but.
No, sorry. I mean, what I was going to say was that the post-score example that you have there could easily be emitted by, well, sorry, could partly be emitted by a receiving DFSP. They would know what the receiver's true identity was. They wouldn't know what the sender's true identity was. All they would know about the sender was the identifier that the sender used. On the other hand, the sending institution would know.
Yeah, I see. And of course, I mean, I guess there's no way, no credible way to involve the recipient institution in the process here. I mean, so yeah, I mean, then unless, I mean, we can think a little bit more about this, but again, maybe then I would try to work with the data that we know we can have consistently, which is yours. I mean,
the other set of data that, of course, we don't have is data relating to on-us transfers.
yes, I mean, yes, this is quite common also in the traditional systems, because I mean, also with most of the jurisdiction, the payment system that we work, also, you know, banks usually don't publicly disclose on us transactions. So I mean, that means that we cannot do much around that. But in our experience, this doesn't hamper too much the network, or at least we are still able to use successfully the network to characterize the activity of accounts. That is precedented in the sense that we are used to that. Actually, I think we never really got a large set of on-us transaction to work on.
Right. I suppose the worry would be that if I understand the way in which your application works correctly, it relies on getting the maximum possible amount of data.
I mean, yes, the point is that we would like to have as large as possible view on what's going on. And then again, I mean, this is not here we are not, because we cannot afford to be maximalist in our request, in the sense that again, we started working in jurisdiction where maybe we had you know, only a few rails, a limited fraction of payments in the system and so on. And I mean, this still carry information, because you can still see, I mean, you can still enrich the view over single accounts based on that thing. So it's not you know, a 0-1, it's a spectrum. So if you have if you have something, it's already better than nothing. And then I mean, you don't need to have everything to you know, for the system to work. And again, I mean, as I was saying before, usually the best way to understand where we stand is, you know, I work a bit with the data and see what's, which maybe leads to my question, which is, I mean, do you envision here again? I mean, I think what we really need to start testing things out, it's historical data, and which comes with the labels. So we need to have some fraud flags from the past, and that I would say it's the step 0 from which we understand what to do next. And then my question for you is, how do you stand in terms of label collection? And I mean, do you have processes ongoing? Do you envision building one? Are you open to, you know, collaboration in understanding how to do it, and so on and so forth?
Well, if I were to answer that question, and I'm not sure I'm necessarily the right person to do that, but if I were to answer that question, I would say we are certainly open to collaboration. We don't, or the Mojaloop system in general, doesn't currently hold any information about fraud. You know, we don't get information about cases of fraud that are reported. We don't get information, I mean, except perhaps by chance, when, you know, if we were asked for to provide information about transfers as part of an investigation, then we might. But we have no formal way of collecting this information. And if we were to become, I mean, if we were to become involved in a project like that, and I think, you know, we would definitely be interested in that, then it could only be as one partner among a number of other partners, each of which would have different information. I mean, the information that we have, as you can see, is information about payments, inter DFSP payments.
Yes.
And we don't even have all of that. So there is the the on-ask DFSP payments. There is the investigation of fraud cases, and indeed the definition of fraud cases. Those sorts of all of that stuff we don't have. So as I say, we would certainly be interested, I think, in collaborating, but I don't want to overstate the amount of contribution that we could make in terms of data.
Okay, no, I think of course I understand that, and yes, here maybe we can. I mean, we can set up some more structured discussion around that, because we don't do the label collection on our own, but we gather some experience about how this is done around in different ways, and we also have some partnerships with companies that are about also ensuring that there is some. I mean, that the process is done properly with the required quality and so on and so forth. Because of course, I mean, label collection is a topic on its own. It has its own challenges and so on. So we can, I mean, yes, we can share what we know around that and see.
Awesome. So we're just coming up on time here. Federico, do you have any comments to wrap up?
I mean, not necessarily. Maybe it just. I mean, if we, as a next step, I mean, if we want to, any of you want to set some discussion on something like that, just feel free to reach me out. I think. I mean, I can send my email in the chat, but also, I mean, you can ask Paul for additional connection, or I mean, just reach if this is interesting for you, because it is for us, so we'll be very happy to participate.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Federico. I appreciate your time, and thank you so much for joining
One
us.
last question.
Go ahead, Paul.
We do have multiple test environments with a live modular deployment. Would it be possible to start a real integration with FNA from there, so we can just see how it works?
I mean, I guess the answer is yes, but again, maybe we should have some follow-up conversation how to set this up specific. I don't see why not, because I mean, in the end, we can just try to understand if what we have is, or you have, is already compatible with what we have in terms of setting up some framework for testing the scoring and so on and so forth.
Okay, well, perhaps we can carry on those conversations offline. So thank you, Federico.